Welcome to the property lane where it's everything real estate. Today we will be studying about something that you encounter in the real estate field. We will be looking at valuation. What is valuation? The valuation methods, the concepts, like how do you arrive at prices? I've been asked several times how are prices jumping in Kololo, for instance. Just 2 years ago, it was around $2.5 million or $2 million, and now it's at around $4 million. We will be looking at how do we arrive at such prices. I'm sure you've met a valuation report from a bank, or the bank has asked you for a valuation report. Your buyer has asked for a valuation report. We will be looking at what is this thing called valuation. With me are gentlemen who are well conversant with this topic. One of them from the field, another a professional valuer. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome our first guest tonight, who is a professional valuer, Mr. Obali. Please say something to our guests.
Hello, thanks a lot. Good evening. My name is Obali Godwin. I am a registered valuation surveyor. Practice valuation for nearly 10 years now. I got registered in 2014, and I'm glad to be answering some of the questions that will be posed and giving you elaborate examples and also explaining what valuation is.
Thank you, Mr. Obali. Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest, probably you're familiar with him. He's a real estate agent who interacts daily with values and prices, and will be giving us his experience as an agent. Welcome with me, Mr. David from Victoria Nile Estates. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. My name is David Mwesije, Managing Director, Victoria Nile Estates. I'm pleased to be here with you as we dissect this important topic about valuation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David. Starting with you, how do you arrive at prices?
Thank you so much. Maybe I can begin with a definition of valuation in general, which will talk about how we arrive at prices. Valuation is an estimated amount upon which an asset or liability exchanges for at a given period of time within an arm's length transaction between a willing seller and a willing buyer, where all parties involved are acting knowledgeably, prudently, and without any force, like as in they are not forced to do that. So how we arrive at prices as agents, we normally look at different variables. We look at location, we look at the size of the property, we look at utilities and the improvements on that property, to mention but a few. So the variables we look at, we have to look at them in totality in order to arrive at a price. Then secondly, we all know properties as a characteristic, it's heterogeneous. No two properties are similar. So even if it is a piece of land, maybe a piece of land X, it will not look like the neighboring plot of land. Maybe one is a corner plot, maybe it will attract a higher value, and maybe the next plot of land has issues with access. So you find that still there are different rates attached to that piece of land, much as they're in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, before I come to the professionals, yes, David, the agents have been accused of hiking prices. What do you have to say about that? How are prices rising from, for instance, Mokono, just in 2009, an acre in that side of Seta High, an acre was going at around 10 million. Today, you can't find a plot at 10 M. I mean, what causes the increase in prices? First, from a layman's point of view, and that's why I'm talking to you, David.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. That's a very pertinent question. I think the role of valuation should be left to the professionals because if you price wrongly, that means your property is going to extend for a long time on the market. So there's a misconception that if I price highly, maybe I'll give value to the property. That is wrong. So that's why we need a valuation team. Good thing Mr. Obali Godwin is here to price the properties, because for them, they're going to remove emotions from the property and they give us the right figure for that property.
Yes, which drives us to our next point, Mr. Obali. What valuation methods exist and how do we do it professionally?
Okay, so thanks for that question. The valuation methods that are there depends on the different property classes. So a property may be a commercial property, and that means it earns income. So then we shall use a method called the investment method of valuation. That is to say, we look at the income that it receives, then we deduct, of course, the outgoings like maintenance, utilities, etc., and we capitalize at a given yield, and we get the market value. We also have properties that don't earn income. Yeah. So with such properties that don't earn income, we shall use the cost approach method. So the cost approach method really looks at the components of land, say, and building. So the land, of course, we shall value it using the comparison approach, whereby we look at what's sold in a given area and compare it with, say, what we have as subject valuation. Then we add it to the depreciated replacement cost of the building, and then lump it together, and it gets you the market value. We also use a method called profits method of valuation. That is, if we are valuing, say, hotels, motels, and you realize that it gets revenue, but the revenues are literally abnormal at times. So you need to get a percentage of that to get you income, and then still capitalize the revenues to income, and then you capitalize it to get the market values. Yeah.
Continue, I still enjoy it.
So
those are the only two methods?
So the methods are rather many. So we have profits approach, profit method. We have, of course, the investment method. We have the cost approach method. And then we have, of course, the discounted cash flow methods. And these are the methods we have to do the valuations.
How are we arriving at prices? Like, for instance, if I wanted to get a mortgage from the bank asks for a valuation report. How come most times your report is different from the owner's estimation?
Okay, so like what my colleague mentioned earlier, valuation literally, it's art and science. It's a process whereby market value is arrived pertaining a given property that has been put in place. Yeah. So clients normally have an impression of how much their property is worth, which in most cases has become something different when they bring it to the professional valuers. So when the banks normally instruct valuers to value properties, what we normally would do first case is to ask the client, what property do you have that you want us to assess the market worth? Once you get to know what property they have, of course, now coming from the bank, you understand that the purpose of valuation is secured lending. And we have so many purposes of valuation, that we really would do. So when the client comes to you, they have an opinion of what it is they want to borrow from the bank. And that normally, as my colleague mentioned, looking at the different attributes pertaining a given property, you realize that the figures that you arrive at based on what method you've used to calculate it might be very different in regards to what it is that he wants. So that is where we've had issues. But we've had scenarios whereby we call them and explain to them how we arrived at the values. And those cases, some have started appreciating what it is that we do. And that has been the way we have been moving with valuation.
Because the way it happens, one is even meant to or suspected to believe that probably the bank just wants to give you the least amount possible, and you are working with the bank.
Yeah, sure. That question has come many times, oftentimes. Yeah, it has come many times. But at the end of the day, it's just openness to explain to the client. Why is it, what's the purpose for you to carry out this valuation? Then agree with them to take you to the property. Like my colleague mentioned earlier, you could have two properties and say two plots. They're in the same area, but what really distinguishes this 50 by 100 with what is next is just the attribute that is there. It could have two frontages. So two properties, same sizes, in the same area, land, but the only attribute that is there that defines it and makes one much more expensive is the frontage, is the access. This could be having a dual access. So that's, you can only oftentimes, when you get the opportunity, explain to the clients. And also, you try as much as possible, because the International Valuation Standard says that you should treat each and every one with utmost respect, irrespective of whether their religious affiliation is different from yours, age, etc. So the clients also need to be treated well in that. If they are not satisfied with your valuation reports, you need to call them, you need to sit them down, you need to explain to them how the figures were arrived at.
Okay, David, how are people arriving at prices, say, those who are selling out of Kampala? Because I know for most people in Kampala, probably they could hire a valuer. But I'm looking at land out of Kampala, out of the greater metropolitan area. How are they arriving at prices?
Prices are arrived at differently. For example, they can use what we call area knowledge for the local agent in that locality. I need to supplement on what my colleague Obali has said. Sometimes they use what we call comparable sales. Maybe the neighbor sold at a given price, so he assumes if so-and-so sold at 40 million, my price should be about that much. So they use that information to arrive at different prices.
Yes, we'll be coming back. We just need to take a short break. But when we come back, David, you'll tell us. I've heard of when people are selling, referring to the big shots in the area that come and buy in this location. There's a major general staying there. Or there is this rich man who has just bought land, you know. How does that affect price? When we come back, we will be telling you more about valuation. Welcome back from that very brief break. Before we broke off, David was telling us how agents come up with prices, or how landlords out of Kampala come up with prices. David, I've heard, and this happens especially out of Kampala, out of the city, when you go to buy land and they tell you there's a major general who just bought there, there's some rich man who is going to construct something in that area, and because of that the price shoots up. The other thing I have noticed is when there's a road proposed in that area. I think you saw when the bypass was going through Munyonyo, that side, how people rushed to hike prices, of course alluding to the fact that they would be joining the highway, the expressway, only to be cut out. And so many people are stuck with their plots and their high prices in that area because they can't sell at the prices they bought. How is that? What causes that? And how does it play out? Does it work for you?
Thank you so much. Well, in my experience, I think it's leaning on psychological grounds, whereby a big personality has bought a piece of land in a given locality. So people tend to think maybe if so and so can buy there, that means it's a safe place to stay in, and hence the values can go up. But mainly it's about psychological and not any other thing.
Yes, Mr. Bali, does that work really?
So, thanks a lot. The question is really interesting. So, in that sense, it's speculative, psychological. In normal circumstances, people think if a big shot comes in, if we had a road that is maram, then what is going to happen is they're going to tarmac it. But we've seen roads being left untarmac even years after the person stays there. So speculative, psychological, which in the end someone buys and nothing happens and the values stay where it is. I really advise my clients, if they don't have the aspect of the national planning or KCCA plans that show that the roads are going to be here, you shouldn't go to such places, because at the end of the day, you stick with that road as it is, and for a long time you start blaming other people that sold to you that land.
Yeah, but you will agree that in some cases it has worked.
Yeah.
I remember when just a few years back in Nakauka, the land was going at also in those ranges of 8 million, 6, 7 an acre. David, can we get the same price today?
Of course not.
Now it is almost 10 times that price.
Yeah.
So it has worked for some.
But I tend to concur with my brother Obali. It might have worked for other reasons, because land has to appreciate anyway, than the personality reason that this minister is in this area. So, like he said, we have so many examples. The minister is in a given area, but the standard of living has remained the same. Maybe the people who were influenced by that big shot to buy that property, they thought maybe that person is going to lobby for what? For different services in that area, but still things have remained the way they are.
Mr. Bali, why is our market highly speculative? And there seems to be no ceiling to that.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for the question. Now, the other thing we should note in that question is we tend not to have a strong regulation, although we are really working in regards to have that regulation in place that at least controls brokerage and all the patterns to which sales are made. As you know, my colleague mentioned earlier, if a market is pretty much defined by a willing seller and a willing buyer. So when a buyer comes and the man says, my neighbor sold at this much, advice I would literally give you is get your opinion from a professional valuer what the price is that side. Because if you, based on what it is he has told you, then you have his word against his word, and there's nothing really you can do. So speculating where prices ranging comes basically in relations to where someone thinks what it is that he should sell the property at is what it should be at a given moment. So that has really affected the market. Unregulated practice, and then a few technical aspects of we should sell it at this. That is what really happens.
In my experience, I've dealt with very stubborn clients who will not change the price, even when it's not working. Like you would rather leave it. David, what's your experience as an agent in dealing with valuation?
Wow, that's a very pertinent question. Okay, this is my experience. Sellers naturally think they can fetch a higher price from their hard-earned property. On the other hand, buyers are looking for a good deal at a significantly low price. So how do these two objectives meet? Recent statistics show that if a property does not gain meaningful attraction in the first few weeks when you put it on the market, then it loses an important and a significant opportunity for it to be correctly priced with other comparable properties. You know, these days, the database is omnipresent. You've heard of a real estate database, whereby there are millions of other properties. So if you're going to sell a given property and you put a higher price tag above its selling zone, then this client who would have bought that property is just going to browse and look at other similar properties, and he goes for that property. And yours, he leaves it there. So you're losing that opportunity. You get it? So what I normally encourage sellers is that, okay, he can tell you, I'm not in a rush to sell, but he has put the property on the market. So the longer that property stays on the market, the lesser the value is perceived of that property. So you find out you're losing on potential clients, and then what I would encourage them, you wait for that, maybe that time when the market is good and you put your property on the market, than the property being put on the market. Maybe you put, for the last 3 years, it has been on the market. So people perceive it to say, okay, there's a red flag on this property. And then with millions of other properties, people will keep buying other properties which are priced correctly than yours.
But if it comes back still on the market, the one thing I know is when agents put a property out there, it's hard to retrieve it and say now it's no longer on sale. How do you eventually sell such a property?
I think we need to, from an agent's point of view, we need to have an open and frank conversation with the sellers on the dangers of overpricing and benefits of fair pricing.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, David, for that. Back to Mr. Bali.
Yeah.
How do we get a particular price for a certain area? Like, I've heard things like maybe Kololo is going at $50,000 per decimal, or Nakasero is at $45,000 per decimal. How do we arrive at such figures?
So thanks a lot for your question. How we arrive at those figures, or where we get the figures. We normally have databases within valuation companies. We have, of course, adverts that are put, of course, on those websites. We also have with the Institution of Surveyors of Uganda, where professional valuers normally share values of properties that they have appraised. In Ministry of Lands as well, when someone is transferring or buying a property from someone to, say, buying a property from this gentleman, he has to transfer it to you. Ministry of Lands normally carry out what we call valuation to ascertain the market worth, to calculate the stamp duty. So that in itself is normally an area where we as valuers will try to go call a few friends, ask them how much is price in this area. And then, of course, we analyze eventually and come up with the figures based on different attributes of the given properties that are there.
And you doing the same thing he is doing?
No, ideally, what it is we are doing is, it could be similar in a way, it's just that we are applying the methods of valuation that one would have gone to school and ascertain knowledge on. And so you literally just either look at the property class and then use a method in regard to that property class, and also you know the purpose for which you value the property, and then you come up with the market, the basis of value. It could be market, could be anything. It could be insurance value if you're doing valuation for insurance. Okay. It could be valuing a property to ascertain the ground rent.
Are those all different values?
Yes, so those are
valuing to sell, valuing for the bank, valuing for insurance.
Yes,
those are all different values.
Those are different bases of value. Bases of value are quite a number. So basis of value, could have the market value, where you have the definition of market value as estimated price of an asset liability between, say, willing buyer, seller within an arm's length transaction, and all of them should have acted knowledgeably, and no one should have been coerced to purchase. So there is that market value. And what's the purpose? The purpose could be secured lending or mortgage valuation. So you could have someone coming to you and say, I have a property somewhere, I want you to ascertain the worth. I'm purchasing. So they sale acquisition. Then there could be a valuation for compensation, where you find individuals have had projects, road projects passing through their land. They need to be compensated for what it is they're going to lose.
Unfortunately, again, our time is fast spent. But before we come to the end of this, what's our first sale value?
So, so if you've not met all the conditions of market value, that is willing buyer, willing seller, the property has been on the market for a long period of time, and then you are forcefully selling someone's property without having the conditions of market value met. First sale value should not exist, but if you are going to sell my property, and you're not going to show my property to all the possible would-be buyers, then you're forcefully selling my property. But that's what does not ever exist. It's just that we try to, and it mostly happens to valuations for secured lending, whereby it's a risky venture into the banks are risking their money. So they need to sell in case you fail to pay their loan or the obligations you have within a shorter period of time, and not the length of time that you would require. So for sale value, I would say you're not looking at the conditions of willing buyer, willing seller. The property is not in the market for the longest period of time. You're actually coerced to sell because you're desperate and you have to sell it. So literally that is what it is.
Wow. It's been a very interesting evening. Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to come to Kabera Country Club for a glass of very good milkshake, for burgers. They have very nice food. They even have buffet, local buffet. If you want to hold your functions here, please pass by Kabera Country Club. From our guests tonight and from Catherine, your host, see you next time.